Hello and welcome to the Economic Circle. I'm Dr. Alex Moseley, the founder. In this video I'm going to take you through the transition from basic demand through to indifference curve analysis, showing you particularly how to read the graphs that are used a lot in microeconomics in university courses. So in basic economics we learn about buying goods and services at different prices. We also review things like elasticity and shifts in demand. Graphically, demand curves reflect the willingness to purchase goods and services at different prices, and graphical shifts in the demand schedule show, for example, what happens when more people come into the market and how they affect the price and quantity bought, or it could be an increase in disposable income, for example. So here's a demand curve or schedule. You should know this by now. Now, as prices change, demand alters. We say that this is a movement along the demand curve from, say, A to B if the price falls from P1 to P2. On the other hand, if income increases, we say that demand increases. There's a shift in the demand curve to the right, and we move from buying a bundle of such as A amount of X goods here, and we can move over to, say, point C here, which is not indicated, but moving from A over there or from here up there, so we can buy more of both. Now, this is what we're fascinated by when we move to indifference curves, and we look at the relationship between two commodities now. Now, we could do more, but graphically it does become harder to represent in 3 dimensions, but the logic stays the same. Now, looking at the relationship between two goods enables us to focus on the effects of a price change between the two, as well as changes in income. Now, the logic remains true to basic principles. So, if there's a fall in the price of good X, this generally causes a rise in the demand for X. This is what we call the substitution effect. But this can also give rise to an income effect. Less money needs to be spent on good X, so this allows us in our budget to spend more on another good. There are all the other goods out there, or just good Y, more of both. It depends on individual preferences. So, for example, at the moment in the United Kingdom, oil prices have been going down around the world, so petrol prices at the pump have been falling from about 140 a litre down to 110, 112. This has freed up money which enables myself and my family to buy other things, such as either more car trips, days out, etc., or more food, or something else like more books or whatever. Right. Now, when we're making choices, we're going to look at how someone may choose between two goods and the logic here. What's the logic of them? We're interested in looking at combinations of two goods that the individual would be indifferent between. Now, this then becomes rigorously mapped for mathematical and graphical representations, and because of this, certain assumptions have to be made. These assumptions, caveat emptor here, customer be aware, create what's called an idealized form or a formalized form of logic of the individual preferences. Now, we have to be aware of this because when we start formalizing things in economics, we can get further removed from the reality. But that's okay when we're playing with pure logic or with the maths. Now, personally, I lean more in my economics towards the Austrian school, which rejects formalization, the mathematical approach, for various philosophical and epistemological reasons, which I'm totally in agreement with. But I'm not averse to playing with the maths and the logic just to see what happens graphically. Often graphs enable us to see things very quickly, and the maths can enable us to see what would happen in more nuanced logical positions. But that notwithstanding, we can see what happens on a graph. I'm still epistemologically skeptical of what we're doing here, but I think it's also a little bit of fun. And I sort of agree with Alfred Marshall that, he said use the graphs, use the maths, but once you've got the logic, just discard them, burn the maths, right? I'm more of that opinion, but it's great fun to get the logic going and see how things are going. So let's have a look at a simple linear relationship here. We're offering an individual a combination of X's and Y's to find their indifference points. So somebody may be indifferent between 14 books here and 0 DVDs, or, as we've just thrown in the diagram there, the line here to show what's going on, 10 books and 2 DVDs, 4 books and 5 DVDs, or a combination of 6 DVDs and no books, right? Now, we're not looking at what income this person's got available. We're just asking, what would you choose? When we find a point of indifference, and we find loads of these in life, we're saying that the person doesn't care whether we offer them 10 books and 2 DVDs or 4 books and 5 DVDs. They're indifferent. They're at the point where they say, I don't care, you choose, I'm not bothered. Right, you choose for me, right? Now, we also make an assumption that if we move to the right, we would want more of both. So let's take a bundle here, 8 books and 3 DVDs. If we offer this person 8 books and 6 DVDs, we will make the assumption that they do want more DVDs at this stage. Now, we can play with this later. There's lots of variations on the themes where somebody may reject that bundle completely. But we generally see that if we want more of both, moving from A to B, we would see this as an improvement. Now, a point here to make is that economists often get into trouble from philosophers, sociologists, political scientists, psychologists, and usually people who haven't studied economics, that we're only concerned with material things, i.e. things that we can touch, feel and see. Yes, we start that off in basic educational logic because it makes sense to think about things that we can touch, taste and feel, etc. and drink. But we can easily swap things like books and DVDs for books versus peace and tranquility or meditation, right? There's no reason for us just to focus on tangibility apart from to make it easier when we're trying to grasp the logic. Now, as we proceed, you'll find that indifference curves come with a bunch of assumptions that have to be made. For example, the slope of the indifference curve is always negative, and this represents the marginal rate of substitution, i.e. the choices between x and y. Moving out from the origin involves having more of both x and y, and we make the assumption that the individual would prefer more to less. Indifference curves are not allowed to intersect. This would create an illogical argument that the same amount of utility could be gained from 2 competing bundles. We also make the crazy assumption that movements between the points on an indifference curve are continuous, not discrete. Now, this is just to help us do the maths. Now, perhaps we could admit to enjoying 1.56 parts of a book, but when we refine it to 1.5674, i.e. as a continuous movement, it becomes rather silly. But the maths is there just to follow the assumption through to the logical limits, and there's nothing wrong with that as such, because we could be using currencies where $1.56 to the pound goes to 1.5674, which you see on the currency trading markets anyway. But it can get rather silly when it comes to cows and things like this, or hours spent watching a DVD. But hey ho, we're just following the logic. Indifference curves are also convex to the origin, or at the minimum they're linear, reflecting again the marginal rate of substitution between x and y. Now, we can play with that assumption later. We can play with all of these assumptions when we get to more advanced technical analysis. Now, let's have a quick look at some regular styled indifference curves. The preference directions are to the north and the east. So take a number such as I prefer 10 DVDs, and if you offer me 4 books or 6 books or 12 books, I would be maximize my utility with a higher number of books, all things being equal. So more books, great, given an amount of DVDs. On the other hand, here's one where the utility curves are shifting to the left, so preference moves to the north and to the west. So an example used from the textbooks here is there may be a return on investments increasing on the y-axis, certainly would increase our utility, our preference for that. But risk, we want to avoid high rates of risk. So this person will be risk averse. They want a high rate of return, but less risk, please. So that's where one of the goods is good and one is bad. One good, bad, as it were. Now let's have a look at the budget constraint, which is identified as I or M or B in the textbooks. The amount of income spent on the 2 goods is a budget. So when you multiply the price of, say, what have we got here? DVDs times the quantity plus the price of books times the quantity bought gives you your budget constraint. So we assume, and this is kind of funny, that all the money has to be spent. Now, what really helps us here is to find point Y1. Y1 is an extreme point and is defined by the budget divided by the price of the books, which makes sense. And you only buy books, so you find your point at Y1. On the other hand, if we jump over to X1, this is where we take the budget divided by the price of books, and that gives you your extreme point for books, and that's kind of cool. So let's say, bring in a consumer here, Sarah can buy any combination between Y and X1, but we also make a funny assumption here that she's got to spend money on the books or the DVDs. She's not allowed to not spend any. So it's like her disposable income, and she's going to spend them either on books or DVDs, but we're not letting her spend anything else or save anything else. So point C is what we'd call suboptimal. In other words, we want to put her on the budget constraint, just for the logic, right? Now let's impose some indifference curves or utility curves on this and see what the logic entails. Now point A would be a position of suboptimality, because if she did purchase more DVDs, she's still on a budget constraint, should actually improve. You imagine a utility curve here between U1 and U2, she could actually improve her utility. And likewise for a point B would be suboptimal, because she could get more utility by purchasing more books. Position C, well, that's just right, isn't it? Now, if we increase her income, we would see that the income constraint or the budget constraint will shift to the right. Now, the relative prices haven't changed here, so the slope of the budget constraint is parallel to the old one, and because the prices haven't changed, and then we can throw in a new indifference curve. So where it goes depends on what Sarah wants to do. So let's say that she wants more of both products. So she will move from position C to D to buy more books and more DVDs with a higher income. Her income's moved from I to I2. The prices of the books relative to DVDs haven't changed, that's why it's a parallel line. Okay, that comes in useful in a minute. On the other hand, she might make a position, take her to a position E, where she's a bit of a bibliophile like myself. She wants more books, less DVDs with higher income. So that's where she might go out and buy Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, for example. Very good book to read. If you haven't read it yet, please do. You learn a lot of economics and history as you go along. So moving from C to E, you can see that she's buying more books but less of the DVDs. On the other hand, she may be more of a DVD, media studies person, and point F takes her to fewer books, shame on her, and more DVDs, right? Now, we're going to move to the more complicated diagram that confuses a lot of students when they first see it. Hicksian decomposition, a lovely term. Sounds as if you should find it in the forensic laboratories, pathology labs here. Hicksian decomposition is to show how a change in the price, so the relative prices between the two, affects what we call the substitution effect from one good to another, as well as an income effect, as that price change frees up money available to purchase the two goods. As I said at the beginning, price of diesel and petrol has fallen in the UK, so that enables me to either drive more, zoom around more at higher speeds, or purchase more books. I'll probably go for more books then. So let's first of all look at the price change. So let the price of X fall, and you can see that the budget constraint has now shifted out to the right. Okay, and if we just put on a U2 here and difference curve 2, we could see there's a combination that she'll move to the northeast at this point. So what's happened is that the price of X has fallen, and the position, the extreme point, has gone from I divided by PX1, or the income divided by PX1, over to I divided by PX2, where PX2 is now less. So there's a movement out to the right. Okay. Next thing, let's have a look at the pure substitution effect. The pure substitution effect. We're going to take a parallel line from the new budget constraint up to here. I'm just drawing this on red, so we're doing a parallel line. We're taking that parallel line, and we're going to drop it onto the first indifference curve, So we're going to drop it down, bingo, there it goes. Let's clear some of that. So we've dropped it down to U1 to the point of tangency. Remember, tangencies are quite critical in calculus and economics when we're playing with curves. So look at the change that is now happening between X and Y along the U1 indifference curve, noting the tangencies. Right, so we're going to move from a position of Y1, a bundle of Y1 is bought initially in X1, over to Y2, so she's dropped the amount of books she's buying and purchasing more DVDs, because they've got cheaper, let's say, from X1 to X2. So there's a movement along the indifference curve. Now we're taking this parallel line because we want to know what is the new budget constraint given the change in the prices. drop it back down to the original indifference curve, which is saying, whoa girl, hold your income steady. What would you do if we changed the prices between books and DVDs? And we find that she actually moves along. She drops some purchases of books and purchases more DVDs. That is the pure substitution effect. That's the first part of Hicksian decomposition. So I'm just showing this on a bigger slide. So I'm exaggerating the relative price changes here. You do need a fine pen or pencil when you're showing this on your own diagrams. So the pure substitution effect shows the alteration in expenditure on the two goods after the price exchange. So here's the original price ratio. Here's the after price price alteration here. So she's moving from A to B, and that is the substitution effect. Right, now let's have a look at the income effect. So we start at the original point A, that's where we started off. We put in that parallel line B, and we've got a new tangency point B. We're now going to move to C, which is at the new optimal with the new price ratio and a higher indifference curve. And what we're looking for the income effect is the move from here to here, right? So let's have a look at that. There's point C. So we're going from point B to point C, and that captures the income effect. So from B to C is the income effect. Right, let's have a look at that again. So moving from A to C provides the overall effect, but the Hicksian decomposition, breaking it down, is showing a shift from A to B as the pure substitution effect, and then B to C for the income effect. So overall, A to C, that's where we end up. A new maximal position here, given the budget constraint, given that the prices have changed, high utility curve, our preferences are for more is better, but we can break it down from A to B and then B to C. Right, now the key thing for learning this is to draw plenty of them. Now, please like the video. The Economic Circle, we are new on the block, and our purpose here is to expand economic literacy around the world and also to help economics students taking courses. We've got a sister magazine, the Economic Circle, which is available on Apple Newsstand, Google Play, and for other smart devices too. And each month we go through economic analyses of different issues such as sovereign debt or deflation have been recent ones, for example, or the BRICS. It's a great price to subscribe for the year. I think it's $47 or thereabouts. Might be cheaper. I can't remember. It's about $47, and it's there to keep your economics sharp. And there's a bit of humour in with the chimp economics, where we take stupid comments made by politicians or non-economists or even economists sometimes, and we just go through the logic and point out the fallacies from a sort of frustrated point of view. Right? Good fun. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. Please like the video below, and look forward to seeing you in another video or through the Facebook. We're on Facebook, Economic Circle, and also Twitter feed. Okay, thanks for listening, guys, and enjoy your economics course. Cheers. Bye for now.